One of the things that I think is important when you're going offshore, whether it's for asset protection, whether it's to legally reduce your tax rate, is you have to understand how the world actually works. Not what worked in a movie about the Wolf of Wall Street, not what is fantasized about by the media, but actually understanding trends of how the offshore world works. One of the things that I think is really important to understand is how offshore companies have changed. And today I want to talk about the specific topic of international business companies and why they may not be the best fit for your offshore needs. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson. I've been doing this offshore stuff for a lot of years now. I've been helping other people do it too. So if you want to learn how we can help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs legally go offshore, move their company, move their banking, move their businesses, go to nomadcapitalist.com and learn really why it's important to have a holistic offshore plan. Because as we're going to discuss today, it's not simply about opening up a company on some far-flung island. We've talked about this before. We've talked about the so-called death of tax havens, because what is happening all around the world is you have organizations like the OECD, a bunch of bureaucrats who, interestingly enough, I don't believe pay taxes themselves, but they want you to pay more taxes, and they've been helping countries, particularly in the Western world, impose more and more regulations to make it more and more difficult to go offshore. Now, it's still possible to do, but there are just a lot more regulations, particularly if you're from a high tax country. And so one of the things that has historically been part of the offshore world and offshore companies have been what's called international business companies, IBCs. This is kind of the old school approach to going offshore. It was interesting because I had a gentleman come to me recently who had gone to one of these, offshore consulting firms that was like from the 1990s, basically. He paid them a lot of money for a bunch of kind of unconnected stuff, none of which I really understood how one thing served another. There was no, overarching, view of how it all worked together. But basically it was all just a bunch of stuff in all these old school tax havens, which just aren't effective anymore for most people. Now, an international business company is something that was created by smaller countries or smaller jurisdictions as a way to basically ring fence local businesses in their country, which had to pay tax, from opening up and allowing foreign business owners to set up shop in the country and not pay tax. And so you'll see countries like Belize, for example, or some of the Caribbean islands, or the Marshall Islands or other South Pacific jurisdictions, just generally really small places. There were a few that were on actual continents, but basically these are countries where they usually had taxes. So, in Belize, for example, if you run a lemonade stand, you've got to pay taxes on the profits from your lemonade stand. Belize is not a zero-tax country. It is not, the Cayman Islands. It is not Dubai. There are taxes. But what Belize realized is, hey, we've got the potential to open up this separate tax regime where we'll have international business companies. Those companies, they have to be owned by people who are overseas. They cannot do business in the same, domestic economy. And so basically, we're maintaining our ability to run our local economy the way that we do and to collect taxes. And so basically what these countries said was, we're going to maintain the right to keep our local economies and to tax them the way that we want. But on the other hand, there are millions of people all around the world who are looking for a low tax or in this case, tax-free solution. So why do we want to deny them the opportunity to give us their money? And so generally what you'd see is like a $100 or a $200 a year annual fee that went to the government. Some of these governments had millions and millions and millions of companies, and they're relatively small countries. And so, that money could rack up pretty quickly, right? And generally what you also needed was you needed some kind of local agent on the ground who would help you set this up, or at least who would act as the registered agent or whatever the local term was. And so you were creating some jobs for local law firms and local businesses to facilitate all of that. And so it comes down to the principle that I've talked about for a long time, which is in an increasingly competitive world, countries need to offer competitive options, right? In countries basically said, hey, if we don't offer 0% tax, someone else will. Let's bring in all this money to our shores. What became difficult was these companies became largely abused. Now, I think it is important to understand there are plenty of legitimate reasons to have offshore companies. One of them is asset protection, and that doesn't matter where you live. If you live, let's say, in the United States, and you want to have your local business owned by a foreign company, there are ways in which you can do that that make sense. I'm not giving you legal advice here, but we do it for folks from time to time where you just want to be able to move your money offshore. You want it to be protected, whether it's from lawsuits, whether it's just having other investment opportunities, whatever, that's fine. Generally, you're not going to save any tax by doing that if you live in a high tax country. Obviously, every country is different, but if we're talking about the US, Canada, etc., Australia, all those countries, sitting in that country full time, you're going to run into all kinds of rules that prevent you from actually enjoying the zero tax benefits. That's something that the promoters of these IBCs never talk about. There are also benefits of things like moving your retirement account overseas. And then there are also the benefits of actually running a business offshore where you can actually pay 0% tax. And there's a number of criteria that you need to fulfill to get that, what I call my tax-friendly quadrant. And so the problem was these things got a bad reputation. Number one, because Western governments do not like competition. And so anywhere where they're offering 0% tax, they said, we don't like that. And the problem was a lot of these countries were so small, they could be bullied. And bullied they were. They were threatened. They were put on blacklists. They were threatened with being cut off from the global economy, having their visa-free travel rights for their own citizens suspended in some cases, and effectively grounding them. And a lot of these smaller countries gave in and have closed down their international business company regimes. Other countries, like Barbados, have reworked it to where now the local economy and the international companies play on the same turf, play under the same rules. And so as a result of all these changes, a lot of these IBCs got a relatively bad reputation. There are still reasons to have an IBC. If you're moving a retirement account overseas and you can find a brokerage account or a place to store those investments, that can work. Certain people who are using estate tax measures or asset protection measures might put assets that are otherwise fixed in one place. They might title those assets to a foreign company. In some of those cases, it doesn't really matter where the company is. You can go to Belize, you can go to Nevis, you can go to wherever. But a lot of these IBC jurisdictions got a bad reputation, which means if you're running an active business that requires a bank account, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to get a bank account. It's going to be tough once you have a bank account to move money in and out or to pay certain people. If you've done business internationally, I see this from time to time, you may need to demonstrate to the bank that's either receiving the money or your bank that's sending the money, what is the purpose of the payment? Why are you sending this money? And the more that you involve these tax havens, these IBC jurisdictions that have developed a rather poor reputation due to all these years of being beaten over the head by countries that don't like competition, you're going to make your life a lot more difficult. Okay. Now, am I saying that I'm against the concept of IBCs? No, but I'm a pragmatist, I'm a business person, and I want to go where I'm treated best. And so while I understand the allure of the IBC, which brings with it almost no paperwork, zero taxes, zero reporting, and I understand why some folks would like the idea of just being left alone. I can also see why, and I've seen this firsthand, why some folks, they want to cover something up. So what I say is, onshore is the new offshore. You want to find onshore havens that have tax exemptions, that have 0% tax, that have very low amounts of tax, and it depends based on where you want to live, based on what your goals are. That'll shape whether you should pay 0%, 2%, 5%, what have you. It's possible to pay 0. That's going to impose potentially a few lifestyle restrictions on you. Some people would rather pay 5, and people to live in Europe, for example, right? Hard to pay 0 and live in Europe. But IBCs, in a world of increasing transparency, in a world where governments are using things like terrorism and money laundering as their reasons for making the financial system more difficult, you want to have potentially a country with some heft to it. An island with 11,000 people on it doesn't have much heft. I'm not saying you've got to go set up your business in a country with 100 million people, but a country that's perceived as quote unquote real and not literally 2 coral reefs is going to be a good idea. And so I think that for a lot of active businesses, these international business companies no longer make a lot of sense. There are cases where they do, even for active businesses. Again, there are cases for things like estate planning and asset protection and holding assets and that kind of thing. But if you're looking at international business companies and somebody sold you the speech of how you can pay nothing and do nothing, understand you're going to have a number of problems. It's not going to be a very scalable solution. And I think in the coming years, you're probably going to need to get away from IBCs. There are promoters who will tell you only half of the story. Merely where you incorporate your company does not solve your tax problem. And you want to be aware of that. That's one thing that I think is important to know. And it's why I think IBCs have largely fallen out of favor. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.